Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on work poverty and welfare. In this video we're going to focus on voluntary welfare. Voluntary welfare is usually associated with the work of charities and organisations that provide support or assistance to individuals who are in specific need of a type of welfare, whether this is financial, physical or emotional. The growth of what is called the third sector in the late 20th and early 21st century has come about due to the gaps in provision between state and private welfare provision, although it's not new, and many charities have long histories of helping out those in need stretching back to the 19th century. The biggest expansion of voluntary welfare, however, has come following the announcement of the then Prime Minister David Cameron's Big Society during the early part of the coalition government. Cameron's idea was to shift the burden of responsibility for welfare from the state to private providers, charities and individuals, as an attempt to develop a form of social solidarity and collective responsibility for those in need. Voluntary welfare is often associated with specialist provision for specific needs, with many charities focusing on the needs of specific groups, often those most marginalised in society. Whilst they have a humanitarian focus and are not-for-profit, there are some who are opposed to the use of voluntary welfare. One example of voluntary welfare that has unfortunately grown over the past 14 years is the provision of food banks. During the period of austerity, food banks started to appear to meet the needs of those who were subject to benefit sanctions or as a short-term measure for those on benefits who were struggling to make ends meet. However, as austerity continued, and with global crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the increase in fuel and cost of living of the early 2020s, the number of food banks and social supermarkets have increased. The largest provider of food banks is the Trussell Trust, with over 1,400 food banks across the UK. A further 1,200 independent food banks have sprung up over the last decade, many located in schools and outreach centres, to provide for those in need. The government's own data suggests that 3% of families regularly use food banks, and many politicians have lauded this as evidence of Cameron's Big Society, although critics suggest that the existence of food banks is, in itself, a failing of the state provision of welfare. During the recent fuel cost rises, warm banks have also started to appear, places where individuals can stay warm during the day rather than face the cost of turning on their heating at home. Other examples of voluntary aid include Age UK, who provide support for the elderly in society, many of whom have welfare needs not met by the state or face social isolation without the charity's intervention. This includes finding care homes, facilitating medical appointments and providing social spaces for older people. Another example of a voluntary welfare provider is Shelter, who provide accommodation for the homeless, whilst also acting as an interest group to promote changes to legislation around housing, rentals and temporary accommodation. There are numerous charities that support health issues as well, with Marie Curie providing specialist provision and practical assistance for those with cancer, Man Up providing spaces for men to talk about mental health issues, the Samaritans providing support for those in distress, and the National Autistic Society providing practical help for those caring for people who are neurodiverse and offering coping strategies for those experiencing difficulties. There are many advantages of voluntary welfare, especially for specific welfare requirements where individuals can gain specialist advice and support that is tailored to their needs. Many charitable organisations will have local centres which provide more immediate support than centralised government welfare, and issues can be dealt with on the same day in many instances. Finally, many charitable foundations have a dual purpose in both providing practical support and raising awareness of issues faced, and pressing for changes to public welfare provision and forming social policy. However, there are limits to the range and scope of support that charities can offer. And that is one of the main disadvantages of relying upon voluntary welfare. Smaller organisations often have limited resources and reach and may not be able to deal with growing demand for their services. As their resources are often dependent upon fundraising and limited government funding, many charities become overwhelmed with demand for their services and are unable to fill in the ever-increasing gaps in provision. Furthermore, as they need to raise funds and promote causes, a significant percentage of charitable donations go towards raising awareness of issues, which limits their ability to reach others in need. Finally, while some charitable foundations receive government funding, there is often a disconnect between agencies and referrals to charitable organisations. Recent publications from the Trussell Trust have highlighted how people were not being referred to other support services alongside food banks that could help individuals in need, for example to debt management advice or how to claim state benefits, which is a significant limitation of being reliant solely on voluntary welfare for supporting those in need. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on work poverty and welfare, looking at voluntary welfare. Thanks for watching.